used by businesses and government agencies and all kinds of people in their homes and institutions, and open up for questions and discussion. But really, anytime that you have a question or whatever, we're going to be having, after each section that I share, there'll be opportunity for discussion or questions that you might have. But please feel free to put them in the chat at any time. All right, so let's begin with our very first poll, just to have a sense from you about sustainability. So Dee, if you could put up our first poll. How much do you know about sustainability? First time hearing about it, you've heard a little bit, you know a lot about it. That's almost a perfect bell curve. That's great. So thank you for responding. It's just helpful to have some sense about it. And so we will talk about what it is so everybody can be on the same page. Do we need to do anything more, Kath or Dee?
No, I believe we are good. And we had about 64% that answered the second option, that they've heard a little bit about it. Approaching 30% had, or more familiar with it, and a really small percentage that have not heard about it.
Great, thanks, Dee. So there are a lot of different definitions of sustainability, and I'm just gonna, this by the way is looking down on rice paddies in Indonesia, in Bali, sort of pretty gorgeous. There are a lot of and this is a great example of sustainable farming, that these terraces have been there for thousands of years. It's really quite remarkable. So I'm going to share two definitions. The first is one that we developed at the Alliance for Sustainability. It's a 4-part definition. To achieve sustainability, it has to first be ecologically sound. Second, economically viable. Third, socially just. And fourth, humane. Humane is a great word. It means to embody our highest values. So how we treat people, animals, and the earth. So we need all four. It's sort of like a chair that you sit on, that you need all 4 legs to be able to accomplish sustainability. And the other main definition that's used comes from the United Nations. This is the most widely used definition, and that is simply that sustainable development meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their needs. So we take care of our needs today, but we also assure that future generations can have their needs met as well. And we're not just talking humans, but all life. So I hope that gives some sense when we're using this term, which we'll use today, what sustainability is about. So any questions or comments on either of those? Did that make sense?
I have one comment, which is I think that for the people on the webinar who work with families,
yeah,
I think that sustainability is an interesting way to come about it, because I think that's what we're trying to do with families, is make them sustainable, make them, or ensure their sustainability. The ecologically sound, economically viable, socially just, and humane are ways that we need to think about how to improve conditions for families. And I especially like it because it's not, the onus isn't always only on the individual to be sustainable or to perform sustainability, that there's an acknowledgement that we exist in relationship to each other, and that the humane context has to be there. The socially just context has to be there in order for families or communities to be sustainable. The economic viability. So I think that there's a lot of, kind of at Be Strong Families, we do parent cafes that are focused on what parents can do within their families to keep their families strong. But then we also started the More Perfect Union cafes, which are about what do parents do to navigate a landscape of injustice, with their kids and on behalf of their kids. And so I think that sustainability helps us think through the societal and environmental conditions, environment writ large, that our families and communities need to be able to be sustainable.
I love that, Kath. I really appreciate you bringing that up. And that was also something that you wonderfully brought up last time when we were discussing about families.
Yeah, and I'm just trying to make a bridge between, because it's kind of like, it's weird to me that environmentalism lives in one nonprofit silo and family support lives in another nonprofit silo, and they don't talk to each other much. That it's just, we have different funders, or we have different funding streams. We exist in different parts of government, and so it's like, to me, it's imperative to bring these worlds together. And I like the idea of sustainability being able to bring the worlds together in a way that is logical for people, that feels logical for people. Because
I love that.
You need clean water in order, like take Flint, Flint, Michigan, and the water crisis that was happening there. Like that affects families, right? That affects family sustainability. If you don't have clean water to drink, or you don't have good food to eat, so anyway.
Absolutely. That is so brilliantly said, Kathy. And I think for those of us who developed the concept of sustainability not that long ago in the early 1980s, that's exactly what we had in mind, that it really is sort of meant to be like a North Star for really all aspects of our life. And it's really meant to be holistic and inclusive of pretty much everything we do, in terms of our culture and arts and music and families and really organizations, really everything that we do. And I think it is a powerful lens when it's understood in that broad way that you were just so wonderfully speaking about it. So I really appreciate that. Any other questions or comments that people have before we move on about sustainability? And maybe one other thing for those of you who know about sustainability, for us, it embraces a whole lot of terms that you're starting to hear more about, like resilience and regeneration and permaculture and circular economy, many other terms we feel we believe in, we agree with, we support, we feel are all integral to sustainability. So then let's move on and get right to the core of what I want to speak with you about. And that's the fundamental needs work by Manfred Max-Neef. This so blew me away when I first heard about it. It was actually in a very hot sauna in northern Sweden with Swedish leaders of the natural step working in communities. And I couldn't tell if it was the heat of the sauna or if this was one of the greatest things I had ever heard of, or it was sort of both. But it really blew my mind when I heard this. I was always a big follower of Maslow and his hierarchy of needs with self-actualization at the top. And that's how I was raised. My mom was a social worker. So I always, that was important for me. And then when I heard this, I went, oh my gosh, this really takes it another step beyond. So I'm very excited to share about this with you. Max-Neef received the Alternative Nobel Prize for this work in bottom-up, people-centered sustainable development. And his core idea that we'll be exploring is that we can meet people's fundamental needs with unlimited amounts of learning, laughter, love, meaningful work, and community, while eliminating what we don't want: stress, expense, pollution, and violence. So this really is quite profound on many, many different levels and addresses a whole lot of challenges, as you will see, that we are facing. So here is Max-Neef. He's known as the barefoot economist because of the work that he has done in Latin America and Africa. And really almost everything he's written is in Spanish. So if any of you are Spanish speaking, you can have a field day with him because that's what he usually writes in. I will forewarn you that his writing is some of the densest, writing I've ever seen anybody ever do. It's a workout. This is one of his articles outside in Real Life, one of his English articles outside in Real Life Economics with Paul Ekins. And he's the head of a big, or has been the head of a big university in Chile. And I think part of the power of what he offers us is he is not from North America. He comes from a whole other worldview, and his work has been in Latin America and Africa. And I think I get chills when I think about it, but he has taught us how we can look at our lives in North America and learn from people in the South. And I think that's really profound. And it probably took someone with that kind of worldview to be able to come up with something this amazing. So here we go. His first main point, there are 4 points, and it's far more complex than this, but this is my very simple way of sharing his complex ideas. And I've written an article about it. I'd be happy to share. If you want to send me an email, I'll be happy to share it, or we can post it on Be Strong Families. And by the way, this whole PowerPoint is going to be posted on Be Strong Families. So you're free to, take notes from it, or, I mean, you don't need to take notes now, but you're free to use it or share it with other people. It's in the form of a PDF, so it's very easy to share. His first main point is fundamental needs are defined and possible to classify. It's not airy-fairy. We know what the fundamental needs are. And this was huge for me. I just went, oh, I don't really know what all of our fundamental needs are. And some of them were a little bit confusing. I always thought, oh, money was a fundamental need, isn't it? And, that kind of thing. So here are his 10 fundamental human needs. Subsistence, so being able to eat, protection, security, being safe, affection, relationships, understanding, so learning, that kind of thing, participation, which I thought was pretty unusual that we want to participate, leisure, to actually take a break, creativity. And this one really amazed me because I never had thought that much about it, but I went, oh, wow, that is very cool. Identity and meaning. This is a huge one. Freedom. And finally, transcendence. This one he wasn't as sure about. He sort of said, maybe. I think it's pretty clear that whole spiritual dimension of ourselves is really an important part of who most of us are. So those are the 10 fundamental needs. And I had been sharing about this for a long time. And I had a 2-part workshop on sustainability in the natural step in New York City. And I had a guy who came who was a poet and a musician, singer-songwriter, and he came back the next day with this. His name is Ed Kopp, and he was with a group at the time called Pop Sustainability. And he put this on a single sheet of paper. And I want to just share what it is he wrote. This is his sort of take on these 10 fundamental needs. So I'll begin, and then Kathy and Dee can pick up each one. So a sustainable self is composed of a physical body that is healthy, exercises, eats a proper diet, gets ample rest, and is
protected and secure with ample shelter and surrounded by family and friends, and is allowed to express
affection or emotion and share feelings, desires, and emotions so that you gain
understanding of yourself, others, and the world around you, which lets you
participate or serve and contribute to your family, friends, causes, charities, allows you yourself to be contributed to, which can be balanced by
leisure, to take time out, to do things for the sake of pure enjoyment, to relax, which allows for
creativity, to allow your own essence, your distinct personality to come through in any form it wishes, be it music, art, dance, writing, sports, which gives you a sense of
identity, that special something in you that makes you distinctly you, which leads to
transcendence, and one's connection to all things, to know that you're one small piece of the whole, which liberates you too.
Freedom and control of your own destiny. Your choices, your intentions, and your actions create your reality. I finished reading that and I was totally blown away, because here on one single sheet of paper was everything that I always had wanted in my life. And he captured it, and it just really amazed me. So I'm just curious if we could do our next poll, Dee. And you can also write any thoughts you have in the chat. What do you think about these fundamental needs?
And that's an invitation. So as you're filling out the chat, I would love to have somebody raise their hand, or somebody put in the chat, how does this resonate with you? How do these fundamental needs resonate with you as you're thinking about your work, as you're thinking about your own life?
And I'm just curious, as I'm looking, I see 50%, 11 of you said excellent, and well, it's changing a little bit. So there were 3 of you, and those are ones that I'm interested in. For those of you who thought it was excellent or good, what is it that spoke to you about that? What did you like about them? And for the 3 of you who sort of said so, I'm just curious, what was missing? What did not work? And if you would share that in the chat, that would just be really helpful, just to get a sense of that.
You know, I'm just going while people, because sometimes it takes people a while to process, you know, and then
right, it's a lot.
And and there's also a lag between when they're thinking about it or writing it, you know, and when it posts. So I'll fill some of that space, assuming that people are busily typing, and say that for me, when you were talking about Max-Neef and coming from Chile, that I learned something in psychology, which in my psychology graduate school, that was that there are different kinds of societies. Some are collectivist, where they're focused on the good of the whole, and some are more individualist, which means they're really thinking about each individual person. Every person, as they're growing up, thinks about their individual success and their personal attainment and their personal well-being. Whereas in a collectivist society, it's more Ubuntu. You know, I am because we are, you know, and you really, it's for an individualist society person, it's kind of interesting to try to put yourself in the shoes of someone who is completely merged with, you know, the culture, you know, and the well-being of the culture being the same as the well-being of the self, you know. And I think that that's part of when, you know, like when you say Maslow's coming from each individual and Max-Neef is coming from a collectivist culture, which is looking more at the whole, you know. So we do have some, Rebecca says, permission to not do, freedom to express emotions. Will this be available? Yes, we said it will be. Can you share it at a parent cafe? Yes. This will be available in materials after the webcast. Yes, they'll be on our website. There will be a PDF, and the recordings and slides will also be there. So what else stuck out for people, for better or for worse? You want to go back, Terry? And before, the one where you had it on one page instead of cops one page, you know, because I think for me, I loved it when you were talking about those 10 needs, like, because I could string them together with a different narrative, you know. So go back to the 10 basic needs, because I think this is really important. So subsistence, which means survival, right? It means being able to have your basic needs for food, clothing, and shelter, and maybe other things, sex, you know, met. Protection and security, which also protects your survival. Affection, understanding, participation, leisure, creativity, identity or meaning, freedom, and transcendence. So what, those of you, whether you were on the, wow, this is amazing, or it's okay, or like, what about this as a description of basic needs? Let's go back one.
Oh, I'm sorry. I keep forgetting that I'm.
So Ellen says the fact that it took in the whole person and included many items that most bureaucratic societies leave out of general population needs when considering funding, etc. And Ellen, another Ellen, says it really covers it all. It's about care and service to others as well as self-care, a holistic approach for overall well-being of humankind. And Rebecca says it also points out spiritual needs.
Great.
For me, I mean, freedom has always been one of my values. And I love that it is, I mean, one of my values for myself, freedom, and therefore engaging in liberation at all different kinds of levels. So I love to see freedom as a human need because I don't see it. And creativity, like when we most recently did our organizational culture survey at Be Strong Families, one of the themes that came out was creativity and opportunities for growth that people valued. And the person analyzing the data was like, I was surprised to see that so often. I was like,
Yeah.
because that's what I think is life is about. It's about, continuing to expand and grow your capacity. And so I think we do offer people a lot of opportunity to be able to, attack their work or approach their work in creative ways, and participation. Like I thought of this, like when you said about sustainability at the organizational level, I thought of this also, if we look at these fundamental human needs and are we meeting them as an employer, or are they being met at our job? Or we're helping people with their subsistence, with their salary, right? We're protecting, do they feel safe here? Do they feel like they're being protected? Do they feel like we care about them? And then the affection piece, do they feel like they can, is there a friendly environment? Can they be, can they express friendship and then understanding? Are they learning? Are they growing? Are they participating? Like we're big on co-creation. So, and participation, do we work people to death or do we recognize that they need fun too? Do they need leisure,
Absolutely.
place that we kind of, do we have happy hours and do we have opportunities for people to be able to enjoy themselves? Like when they used to be traveling, I made sure that we had enough of a budget for meals that they wouldn't have to eat at Chipotle or put your fast food, under $10 dinner. I wanted them to have like a $30 dinner because I wanted them understanding that being on the road is tough, being away from your families. At least they would have the opportunity to be able to go to a nice restaurant that they might not, and they wouldn't have to pay for it, So there's that kind of like, recognition that leisure is important. Being able to be creative, having identity and meaning, like what your job is.
Yeah.
Not feeling like you're a puppet, like you're being controlled by your supervisor. And then I think transcendence, one of our values at Be Strong Families is spirit and paying attention to the energy of things. And love is another value. So I think that love and spirit gets us to transcendence in our values. So I know it's probably a little bit long but I think that as an employer, as an organization, this is a great framework for being able to think about, do we have a healthy culture here?
Exactly. Beautifully said. I really appreciate that.
So you'd like to see it contrasted side by side with Maslow. Yeah, that would be interesting. I mean, you got survival, right? Like you have a number of these would be grouped under, one thing in Maslow. So Maslow has, the belonging as one of the basic needs. And I would think that like participation and affection would both fit under there. I don't think Maslow has leisure on the basic needs. Like, I don't know where that would fit because it's more psychological and more interested in your head and how you're thinking about things. And this seems also to include the affective side and the emotion of life and value how you feel in your life rather than your contribution.
And the idea of Maslow, at least as I understood it, was that the goal, there is a place that we're moving to, and the place is self-actualization. And self-actualization was built on these other pieces down below. And I'm going to go into it right now. But Max-Neef says no. he actually feels that people have all 10 of these fundamental needs at all times. And it's surprising because sometimes one of these people are usually trying to meet all 10 of them in one form or another. Sometimes one takes more precedence, but they all matter to people. And I'll go into that in just right now, because I think this is quite profound and a different way of understanding who we are as people.
So Maslow says you have to first get over survival, and
right.
then you can have protection and security, and then you can move to belonging. But the fact is, and I say this about the chakra system and everything else, the fact is that, and transcendence, Maslow also added transcendence beyond self-actualization at a certain point. But transcendence is something that you aspire to. It only comes, after you've got all this other stuff taken care of. But you've met people in your own life who are transcendent, who are
exactly,
connected to spirit and connected. And you've met people who don't necessarily have their survival needs met, but have a lot of love for their family, for their children, So I think we're really onto something. Instead of looking like a ladder that you move up to be able to get somewhere, that it's really all happening at the same time. And you can kind of look at how much juice do you have in each of these areas.
Exactly. That's beautifully said, Kat. I really appreciate that. So let's go on to the second of Maslow's points, of Max-Neef's points. And so first, we know what these needs are. We've spent a good amount of time understanding them. Now, he says, they're actually the same in all countries and throughout all history. He says that these needs have never changed. They define what it means to be a human being. How the needs have been satisfied is what changes. But the needs have always been present. And he says that's what defines us as human beings, having these needs. Our cultures will come up with very different satisfiers of those needs. Sometimes what he will say are what are called false satisfiers. And those false satisfiers are sometimes things like money, because we think, well, we know the phrase, money can't buy you love. Well, there's a lot of truth to that. It can't buy you love. And there are other, like having weapons gives people a false sense that they are secure. And so there are multiple needs that can be met if you pick the right satisfiers. So that's his second point. And the third is, and this is the big one for me, they are not interchangeable. So you can have a lot of financial resources, for example, and okay, that took care of my, basic needs for subsistence, but it doesn't meet these other needs. And I was living in the question of how is it that we, as one of the wealthiest countries in the world, can have so many people who are struggling in terms of meeting their fundamental needs, whose lives are empty and meaningless or lonely or whatever. And how was it that I could go to so many other countries, very poor in the world, like you were just referring to, Kathy, where the children who maybe had a hoop as their only toy or a ball could be far happier in many cases than our children, who had all kinds of access to all kinds of things and lots of money. And I struggled with that. How is it? And what Max-Neef says, which is really profound, is that poverty is not a lack of money. Poverty is an unmet human need. And based on that, Max-Neef says that in fact, the US is probably the poorest country in the world in terms of meeting fundamental needs. It really blew my mind. It explained so much with that understanding of what poverty is. Well, and his last point is this: it's actually possible to have more satisfaction, but use less stuff. We don't need all of these things that we buy and then throw out, where we're consuming the planet to death, instead, those are part of the false satisfiers. Certainly people need basic things like their shelter and, that kind of thing. But at a certain point, what ends up happening is that those very things are false satisfiers. Oh, let's go shopping. And that is a false satisfier for this idea of having a sense of connection, of meaning. And we've tried to fill it in our consumer culture by buying things, buying more and more, or being addicted to whatever things that are out there, TV shows or whatever the thing is, where what we're really looking for is how do we satisfy our fundamental needs? And so when we understand this, it becomes really a profound way of understanding the world. And I'll just give a few quick examples and then we'll open up for questions and discussion. So here's just a very simple example of it in practice. This is in Gothenburg, Sweden's second largest city. This is a large apartment complex that they built very ecologically, very smart. They have solar panels and they have day lighting and they have all kinds of energy conservation, all great ideas. But they did one other thing, and they put in this attached greenhouse. Now, that attached greenhouse seems like a very simple, smart thing to do. I mean, let people grow organic food to meet that need for subsistence. And also the idea of taking that solar energy to warm the building so you can do that. But what they didn't understand is how it met so many of these other fundamental needs that people had for identity and meaning and creativity and participation and leisure. So the point is that we can design our homes and our communities, our workplaces, to fulfill more than one fundamental need, to fulfill many fundamental needs that we have. It's not hard, it's not expensive. It's something that we can do if we understand what those needs are and how we can create a society where that's our goal. Our goal in your family is to fulfill your fundamental needs. Our goal in your community, in your workplace, in our country, that really should be our organizing principle. How do we fulfill those fundamental needs? And it doesn't have to cost more. In many cases, it can cost less. So, and I love this from the Tao Te Ching. If you realize that you have enough, you are truly rich. Sort of a whole different way of understanding things like play and leisure and creativity, all those kinds of things that we can have abundant amounts of that really don't cost very much at all, if anything. Reading a book, I mean, there are just so many creative ways that we can go places and do things that don't have to have a negative impact and can actually fulfill our fundamental needs. Here, this example really lays it out in very stark terms from the Children's Defense Fund. On the left, we look at this question. If we do not create strong families and a strong culture, these are the costs for us. For one kid, $49,000 for juvenile detention. The Ohio Juvenile Correction Facility, $123,000. Adult prison, $26,000. So the total cost to our society, that's per year. The total cost to our society for this kid's life is going to cost us $3.8 million. We pay, all of us will be paying for this kid. On the other side is the same kid who's going through a community program, something that maybe Be Strong Families or some of you are working with, where there's an after-school program, a net gain of $3,800 per year. I'm sorry, that's the cost. And then Ohio State University education, Job Corps training program. This kid, the same kid, will actually, when you take out all of those costs, will be a net positive in our society of $1 million. So the difference between the one and the other is almost $5 million per person. That's a choice that we can make with every child. Kathy and I have talked about this. How do we create a child-centric society? How do we really shift? How can Be Strong Families be part of everything? And when you put the numbers out in this way, you can speak to a Republican or a Democrat and they can agree. Which do you want? Do you want to pay out 4 million, or do you want to have a net gain of $1 million and have all of these other fundamental needs and actually have strong families and a strong culture? So I think this really lays it out quite graphically.
Well, and Be Strong Families would say, just that child-centric, we really think family is the unit, and family-centric because, you need to invest in the parents as well, because
yes,
children need parents. They do better with parents who love them. So how can you invest in the family so that the child is doing better? So that's another, and I'm just like blown away, Terry. What I'm thinking of is cascading thoughts, but some of it is that we've actually in the West, and not just the US, but in Europe and the West, and in the history of colonialism and all of those, patriarchy, etc., we've actually told people that they don't need what they need. Like we told people, our psychology, spirituality was considered neurosis by Freud. And so our psychology, the founder of modern psychology, Jung didn't believe that, but Freud did. So there's a big part of like what we thought was a healthy person that said that spirituality was a neurosis,
Exactly.
Same thing with creativity. We haven't said everybody's creative, everybody needs creativity. We've said only the people who we classify as artists need that, In terms of leisure, we have denied the importance of leisure for people in order to get them to work harder,
Exactly.
So our culture has actually told people, you don't need this stuff, which is gaslighting. It's like crazy making for people.
Exactly.
And people know that they need it because they go to church, or they go to synagogue, or they go to mosque, or they have their own spiritual practice. Why are so many people doing yoga these days?
Exactly.
Because they know they need it, but Western culture has told them that they didn't, So I think that that's also like a really important point in terms of how do you get to a healthy culture, that recognizes these as human needs,
Beautifully said. So here is the power of this approach, and then we'll get to questions and comments.
Okay, just one thing, because
please.
Catherine said that can this slide be sent to my email? And I was considering that slide, the Children's Defense Fund slide, I was just going to encourage everybody, you can screenshot it. Like, as you can get the PowerPoint, which in the PDF and extract it from there, or you can just screenshot it and then it'll be there. We can't send one slide to you via email, but if you want to take a screenshot, you can do that. So. And then
thanks, Catherine.
Overemphasis on reason and logic in Western culture purposefully excludes everything else. It's not, yes, and it's reason and logic, but it's also, it's also systems of power, that operate, with some people being able to experience their whole selves and some people being encouraged only to experience a very small portion.
And as well as media and the brainwashing that goes on with a consumptive culture. And I think that there are a number of factors.
Capitalism also. In terms
exactly.
Of
so here,
religion, then,
So here's why I think this is so powerful. The great thing is everybody has these basic needs. We are not leaving out any person when we have this discussion. Everyone is included. When I share this with legislators, nobody is against this. It's the one thing that Republicans are as excited about as Democrats or Greens or Independents. So it's a way that we can bring very diverse people together. Companies like Ray Anderson at Interface, which was the largest commercial floor covering manufacturer in the world, use them. and basically said this is what he'd been looking for, the prototype of the new company, of a company of a new millennium. And he started using them. So the core idea is this: we can meet everybody's basic needs. This is not an impossible thing. We can change the world. And at the same time, this is the best antidote there is to this disease of affluenza, of consuming the planet to death. Rather than telling people that they have to give up things, that they have to sacrifice, that they can actually have more of what they really want, which is healthy, attractive, and nurturing environments, sense of community, being able to walk down a street at night and feel safe and secure, family, all of those kinds of things, meaning, and less of what they don't want: pollution, violence, stress, and expense. And here's Ray Anderson of blessed memory, who wrote this book, Confessions of a Radical Industrialist: Profits, People, and Purpose, Doing Business by Respecting the Earth, as well as people. And he exemplified it. His company incorporates these ideas very powerfully. One of the best companies to work for.
What is his company?
Interface.
Okay.
The world's largest commercial floor covering manufacturer.
Oh.
So I want to conclude this section by just saying, in the immediate aftermath of 9/11,
you could say COVID.
yeah, it definitely applies now to COVID. You'll see. Everyone looked at their lives differently. It was a horrible time, but we were engaged in a way we had never been engaged in before. We rethought, what is important? Why am I here? What's my purpose? And what people wanted to do was to serve, to contribute. That is who we really are. But what did our country's leadership ask us to do? What did they ask us to do? Go shopping.
Mm-hmm.
And it's shocking when I do this with a group and I can actually hear people's voices. They will say, go shopping. So this wasn't a little thing. America was on the same page. We wanted to make a difference. We wanted to contribute. We wanted to have purpose. We want to serve. That is who we are. It's an amazing thing. And that's the question that so many of us are in right now with COVID-19. We are looking at our lives, this busyness that we've gotten into and everything else, and really in the question, what matters? Why am I here? But at that time, every American knew that is not what we wanted to do. And this is the key thing. We are far more than our things. We've been brainwashed into thinking that we are consumers. But the truth is that we are citizens. We care deeply, but we are not told that. We are not reminded that. We are not led in that way. So I think that this is really the conversation of our time. This question, this discussion, how we see ourselves, how we see our families, how we see our communities, how we see our country, can literally change the world. This is our power. Once we understand these fundamental needs, we can redesign every aspect of our lives around the principle of how do we fulfill these fundamental needs. And it's not like we're bad people. We are wonderful, caring people. But we've got a system that is actually giving us the wrong messages, giving us the wrong incentives to be able to do this. So I think this is huge. And I'll just conclude this section by just saying, this is from Mike Nickerson, a big sustainability leader in Canada. And he said this: we can no longer have everything we want. And boy, I'll tell you, when I read that, I was really sad. Because I'm an American. I thought, hey, I can have anything I want. But then he added the next part, which is huge. But we can be more than we ever imagined. That's the possibility. Once we understand these needs, we can actually fulfill those needs in extraordinary ways with ourselves, with our families, and our communities. So this really can be a conversation that can transform the world. So questions and comments. I see that we've got about 6 minutes left. So I've got many more slides of examples that we won't have time to go into, but you'll have the whole PowerPoint. And those other slides are going to go into this consumption addiction, affluenza, and how this can help get rid of that consumption addiction, and also into voluntary simplicity and the natural steps for principles. Sorry, Kath, what were you going to say?
No, I had a question for you, because as I'm thinking about it, the go shopping, I'm thinking about right now with COVID. I mean, when you see people have jobs, you know, that are little small stores, small businesses that are going out of business, and you see locally restaurants that are really struggling, and those are people too, and they have businesses, and you can help them by going shopping.
Absolutely.
And they are in a way serving by, you know, there doesn't have to be such a hard distinction between serving and, you know, providing food, you know, like people in a restaurant, like they're providing food. That's a service. So
it's a great service. And I was a restaurant server many times, and I loved serving.
Yeah.
I loved contributing.
Well, and so I'm saying, like, there isn't such a, like, it's not like a bright line between it's don't only go shopping, and don't go shopping at the expense of everything else. Like, if you would feel better, you know, if your physical body would feel better going for a walk, you know, in nature, or playing with your kid, or, you know, chilling, taking a nap, then don't get yourself to the mall, you know, like don't spend that time shopping. So I think it's about balance, you know. Like,
I totally agree. And maybe the other, in addition to balance, just a conscious choice. Once we know what these fundamental needs are, I may want to contribute. I may want to actually have my money go to support that restaurant that I love so much during these dire times, because I love what they do. They're an important part of the community. I want to support their servers and everybody else who's connected. I think that that's a great thing to be able to do. But we're doing it consciously. We're not being unconscious, like this is just what we do.
Right.
We're really making a choice that, and I hear people saying that, I want to support my local restaurant, or I want to support my local business, or whatever the thing is. And I think that gives us meaning to be able to do that as well.
Andrew said, this is in the chat, Andrew said shop and eat local, and Rebecca said, yeah, but even chain stores and big restaurants provide jobs for local people, and Amazon drivers are people too, you know.
Exactly.
So, but I've also seen that during COVID, like, people are actually spending less money, time shopping, and are actually building up their savings. Like, that's a statistic that's out there.
Yeah.
And so I think that's also important. Is it's like about it's we're not saying don't ever shop at Walmart, because lots of people do work at Walmart, and Walmart is the biggest, you know, purchaser of organic foods in the world.
Right.
And as Walmart, you know, makes its policies known, they've had a lot of impact. You talked about this last week.
Right.
A lot of impact on getting growth hormone out of milk, on, you know, those kinds of things. So it's
getting other companies to go organic and have ecologically sound products.
Yeah. So, but it's about, I love what you said about, it's the consciousness about all of it. Rebecca also said that I wish you had time to go into even the first step in what to do, but is this next week? Are you going to be talking about the?
Yes, we'll talk about these 4 principles, 4 steps that you can take with the natural steps. So we'll have plenty of time to go into those.
Great. Well, this is awesome, Terry. It's been terrific, and we look forward to next week as well. Want to go to the next slide, because we try to end on time. And if Dee can share, if you can stop sharing and Dee can share, that would be great. I think I'm so excited about cafes on the fundamental needs. Like, for those of you who are cafe people, I'm really excited about bringing the fundamental needs into Be Strong Families as a way we build it into our organizational culture, you know, and really measure our adherence to that, and also about the possibility of cafes with families, with parents thinking about these fundamental needs. So tomorrow, Tunja's going to be here talking about making literacy a family thing. And on Friday, we're going to talk about the vaccine. I mean, it's not a training on the vaccine. My sister, who is a nurse, will be here, and she has a lot of information, and we'll be providing some information. But it's really just having an opportunity to talk about, about how COVID will end and about where we are with relation to the vaccine, how we're feeling about it, what we think we are planning to do, how we get back to some kind of ability to be in person again. Monday, we're off for, it should say President's Day, not Presence Day. I'm sure that was a typo, an autocorrect typo. And then Tunja will be here on Tuesday again, supporting math skills at home. We're trying to continue to assist families with the remote learning thing, and how you can help your children with their education. And Terry will be here next Thursday, and with the natural step framework. And we appreciate everybody's being here. And I want to say until next time, if you can just fill out the poll before you leave, and we'll see you next time. And thank you again, Terry, and thank you everybody who was here. Amplify fundamental human needs. Yes, terrific. Awesome. Okay, well, thank you for coming, everybody, and we'll see you next time.
Yeah, thanks so much, Kathy. Thanks so much, Dee. And thank you, everyone, for taking the time. I'm very excited that we could do this together, and hopefully you can join next time as well. And also, if you didn't see about our previous webinar on Declaration of Co-Creation and Interdependence, that's also recorded.
Yes, yes. Looking forward. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thanks. Bye.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Terry and Kathy. I'll just be here for 1 more minute.
Okay.
So everybody
Thanks,
can
Dee.
fill out the polls. Thank you.
Great job.
Thank you, everyone. I will be shutting down this English webinar now.